What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Sports Talk on Tap podcast. We're here. You can find daily videos Monday through Friday, mainly covering the NFL, but we'll also cover some NBA, sprinkle in the MLB as playoffs approach, and a little bit of hockey as, NHL, NBA. They're quickly approaching, believe it or not, training camp starting up soon. But with that being said, we already know what we have to get into. We are here to talk about our reactions to most of the NFL Week 2 games done. We still have our Monday night doubleheader, what should be two very good games. Tampa Bay versus Houston, Tampa Bay's electric offense versus Houston's elite defense. How will Houston's offense look? And then the Chargers versus Raiders, and what should be, a great game between two very improved teams, a head coaching rivalry in Harbaugh and Pete Carroll that go back to, the 49ers Seahawks days. But with that being said, there were a lot of games yesterday. And for me, it was a sad day at the end of the day, despite a great week where my Vikings lay an egg on Sunday Night Football against the Falcons. But we'll get into that later. Because with that being said, we'll start off with the 1 p.m. games, where the first game we'll cover is the Seahawks versus Steelers. And this was an interesting game. I took the Steelers, and opening drive, Seattle, Sam Darnold, the play action was thriving with Clint Kubiak. They scored easy. The Steelers, though, did respond with 14 points to take a 14-7 lead. Aaron Rodgers found DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf did have a couple drops, but that touchdown catch was just elite, showing off his pure athleticism over the defender. But the thing that set this game up was Seattle kicks a field goal with about 8 minutes to go, and they take a 17-14 lead. And then Caleb Johnson makes a mistake where the ball bounces before the end zone, and he thinks it's a touchback. However, that's a live ball, and Seattle recovers and takes a 10-point lead to go up 24-14. The Steelers get a field goal to, make it a little bit interesting, but then Seattle and Sam Darnold shows, why he got paid that money, made some great plays scrambling out of the pocket, and they were able to march down. They were already in field goal range, but then Kenneth Walker just gets a third 19 drop play and scores. And a couple things can be said. The Steelers defense, in the first half, were more definitely showed, why they were elite unit heading into the season. Jalen Ramsey had a nice pick. Cam Hayward made that batted ball play on Sam Darnold. But Sam Darnold, showed why he also got paid in that second half, down 14-7, facing an 0-2 start. He clutched up, made some nice throws, especially on that last drive to seal the game. And, kudos to the Seattle offense. They definitely bounced back, in that Seattle defense contained the Steelers offense, forced Aaron Rodgers into a couple picks, and, just pressured him, made him look uncomfortable. In the Steelers offense as a whole really could not get anything going outside of the first half. Second quarter, they started, show some life, but in the second half, held them to 3 points. Says a lot about how the Seattle defense has looked so far with the Mike McDonald. It's going to be an elite unit, and if that offense can join them like they did this week, this team could be dangerous. And, I kind of have a gut feeling, betting against my guy, Sam Darnold, right before kickoff. But, the way Steelers looked in week 1, especially that offense, I couldn't bet against him. The defense, did look better. It really only allowed 24 points. But, the Steelers just with the end zone pick when it was tied, and then the self-inflicted wounds by them on that receiver where Aaron Rodgers was trying to find Freiermuth when it was tied 14. Seattle gets the turnover, and kind of off and running from there. So kind of an unfortunate game to get wrong. It was a pretty 50-50 game. It really, the 31-17 looks like a blowout. It wasn't really that, but Seattle just made more plays, and were mentally the stronger team in this one, and that's why they won on the road. A nice gritty win for them, bouncing back after that kind of heartbreaking loss against San Fran. Next up, then, Patriots Dolphins. This was an intriguing game. I took the Patriots, and kind of thankful I did. Obviously with the win. This was definitely, though, for Miami, the offense did look better. Tua did have that turnover at the end of the game, but this Dolphins team was desperate for some points. Tua in the offense did come out slow, and the defense came out slow. Drake May was balling early. The Patriots went up 12-0 due to some missed extra points. But, Tua in that offense eventually settled in. He found Jalen Waddle for some nice plays, Tyreek Hill. But overall, when it mattered most, we had a crazy back-to-back play where the Dolphins get a punt return touchdown, take the lead by Malik Washington. And then next play, Dolphins on the kickoff, Antonio Gibson takes it to the crib. So overall, this was a fun game, but the Patriots, when they needed to stop Harold Landry, gets in for a sack to force a fourth and long, and then Milton Williams gets the sack to end the game. And this is what the Patriots paid their guys for, to be an elite front seven defense, and they showed that at the end of the game when they were able to get some clutch stops. Drake May in the offense, looked way better. Drake May was way more efficient, and I am curious just how much did they run the ball in this one. And you see, this is the much more balanced offense I was talking about. Last week, Drake made like 35 times. This time, 19-23, efficient, 2 touchdowns, no picks, 82% completion. But give the ball to Ramondre Stevenson 11 times. Travion Harrison, I still wish he got more touches, but, Drake May running it 10 times himself. A much more balanced offense in this game. And Ramondre Stevenson, being the leading receiver on this team, had some big plays in this one. But overall, for the Dolphins, it's a heartbreaker because you were at home, needed this one. Now you're 0-2 and a division loss. And now week 3, short week, Thursday Night Football, you're playing Buffalo. Good luck. Things are looking a little bit rough in Miami right now. But I guess the only positive is Tua, and this offense did look better. Next game, Bengals versus Jaguars. I took the Bengals, and boy, this was a great game also. Very, high flying, but also a lot of turnovers. Obviously, the storyline is Joe Burrow going out early in the second quarter, I believe it was, with, it looks like turf toe, so he could be out for a couple months, which just sucks for the Bengals. I mean, so much optimism the way he played last year, but Joe Burrow, this offensive line can't really keep him protected, and, that's what happens when you don't have a healthy offensive line. He's gotten injured in the past just from getting banged up, and it came back to bite him this game. But for Cincinnati, I guess the only positive is you did win this game and you are 2-0. Jake Brown's just a gunslinger. He's going to throw some picks. He's going to throw some touchdowns. And the thing I love about him is he just throws those 50-50 balls to T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. He knows how to get the ball to his playmakers. We saw that in 2023 in the second half of the year. When Joe Burrow went out, he was winning them some games. I know all too well when he beat my Vikings, and he looked pretty solid in that game. Just, trusting his receivers to make plays. And that's what happened in this second half to, spark the comeback. For Jacksonville, Travis Etienne looked pretty good again. Not as great on the ground, but did have some nice receiving plays in there, and, still rushed for 70+ yards. But for Jacksonville, this just stinks. You can't lose this game when Joe Burrow goes out and you're already leading. And part of it's on the defense, but part of it's on Trevor Lawrence. 2 picks, really both unnecessary. And, I think like a 57% completion, it gave Cincinnati more opportunities. And then Jake Browning is able to lead a game-winning drive, put the Bengals up with less than a minute to go. And the Jacksonville Jaguars obviously couldn't answer that. So, man, this is, a win-loss for Cincinnati. Like I said, losing Joe Burrow hurts, but you are 2-0, in case he could come back at the end of the year and just, rack up some of these close wins like they did against Cleveland last week against Jacksonville. But for Jacksonville, just the way the offense looked last week, very efficient. This week, you still put up 27 points, but, obviously those 2 turnovers. And then just Brian Thomas Jr. Getting called out for, avoiding contact. Obviously not great. So overall, just some question marks with this Jaguars offense still. Is Trevor Lawrence the guy? He did make some nice plays in this one. He did throw 3 touchdowns, was scrambling out of the pocket, but also made some boneheaded plays and, was just inaccurate. But also part of that is on, Brian Thomas Jr., dropping some questionable balls where it's like he knows he's going to get hit. And overall, just kind of, disappointing. I was expecting a big game from him. And, Travis Hunter had some catches in there. But overall, for Jacksonville, this is just a painful to lose when you're winning 90% of the game. Joe Burrow's out, and then they sell at the end, and Jake Browning leads that game-winning drive. But overall, shout out the Bengals. Resilient so far. Hasn't been 2 easy wins, but they found a way to do it. And now they head to Minnesota next week to take on my Vikings. So I'm curious to see how they look in that one with Jake Browning get a full week of practice. But with that being said, next up, an AFC East matchup between the Bills, Jets. Jets fans were, optimistic, rightfully so, the way that offense looked in week 1. That did not carry over to week 2. And for the Bills offense, they were just pounding the ball pretty much all game with James Cook and, kind of utilizing Josh Allen out of the play action. They went up early like 20-0 and kind of never looked back. The Jets offense couldn't get anything going. Their 1 touchdown was a Tyrod Taylor-led drive, I believe. And, the Bills, James Cook, proved why he's worth that money. As we can see in this one, I believe he had over 100 yards on the ground. 132 yards, 21 carries, just, a couple touchdowns. Josh Allen, 60 yards on the ground as well. Didn't really need to do much in the air. Kind of reminds me of, the Bills Ravens game in the divisional round where, Josh Allen, the box score may not stand out, but just the threat he provides in the passing game and just can use his legs. They're just going to run the ball, James Cook, if they need to. And Justin Fields and the Jets offense, first play of the game was a fumble, and that kind of set the tone early. And for the Jets, I'm just, disappointed in this defense. With Robert Saleh, it was an elite unit. I know the offense, struggled, but, once they fired Robert Saleh, defense was, a bottom 10 unit in football. And so far, the first 2 weeks, they let Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers throw for 4 touchdowns on them, and the Bills just run all over them. So I still have some question marks. Eric Glenn's a defensive mind. What do they need to do to get back to being an elite unit? Because you still have guys like Sauce Gardner, Quinn Williams up front. I'm just curious, what's the answer for the Jets? And, can this offense bounce back from a disappointing outing and, get back to that running game utilizing Justin Fields in the play action? Rams Titans, this was surprisingly a very good game for a while. The Titans were actually leading at halftime, I believe, like 13-10. Cam Ward was making some elite plays in this one. That touchdown pass, he just scrambles out. And I'm trying to remember that guy, the wide receiver on the Titans, number 5. Got to go to the box score because I don't want to mispronounce his name, be a little bit disrespectful. Amanor. He made a great catch on that touchdown drive. And overall for Tennessee, I mean, you got to be a little bit optimistic. They rattled the Rams offense for the first half. Matthew Stafford made an uncharacteristic pick, but the Rams offense is just so high powered that it was able to come back and just that second half. Devontae Adams getting going. Puka had a big rushing touchdown early and just find the weapons. They were able to get this done and kind of, turn on the Jets in the second half. So overall, Tennessee, you got to be, more encouraged. The offense definitely looked better. They, obviously had to settle for a lot more field goals than they'd like to. But at least they were moving the ball, unlike last week against Denver. So overall, this is a win-win. The Rams, you win by 2 touchdowns on the road, in the Cam Ward's home opener. You're down early. They showed great resilience. This offense is so high-powered. The defense, did its job when it mattered most. But for Tennessee, this was improvement for the defense. They continued that elite status from week 1 against Denver into the first half, holding the Rams to 10 points. Obviously, they get tired because the offense, eventually kind of stalls out. But overall, for Tennessee, this is definitely improvement. I'm curious, how do they continue to look? They face 2 of the best defenses in the league, and Cam Ward has shown a lot of great flashes. So I'm excited to see, when they get a lesser opponent, which may be next week. I haven't really looked at the schedule, how they continue to improve. Browns Ravens, what was expected, pretty much everyone's lock of the week. The Ravens, while early it was a little bit of a struggle. Myles Garrett and the front 7 were getting after Baltimore, and King Henry, who I have my fantasy team, did not do crap. So the Browns run defense was on point, but Lamar showed why he's grown so much, that even when the run game is working, he is an elite passer. 4+ touchdown passes, just hitting different guys. Zay Flowers, D Hop. I don't believe Mark Andrews was too involved in this game, but Rashad Bateman, they were just getting different guys involved. Even when the run game isn't working, you're just posing that big of a threat. You have to stack the box and make these receivers beat you. In Lamar with his arm, and he will. And, another great MVP-like performance. And the Ravens defense, definitely had a bounce-back week against the Browns, which is to be expected. Joe Flacco on this offense couldn't really do much. I believe they had 1 touchdown drive and then a garbage touchdown drive at the end of the game. But with that being said, it was kind of expected what this was. The Ravens showed why they're one of the best teams, just destroying an AFC North opponent. Then next up, 49ers Saints, low-key an underrated game. I wasn't tuned into this one as much, but from the parts I did see, Mac Jones, made some nice throws. That touchdown pass to McCaffrey, I believe it was either at the end of the first half or beginning of the second half. Just some play action reads. And I think this shows how important system is when Mac Jones, obviously with the Patriots at the time, an incompetent franchise, with the Jaguars, with Doug Peterson, incompetent. Obviously, they're going to look like poop. But when you go to a system with Kyle Shanahan, just utilize the play action, these guys are not bad quarterbacks. And we saw that with Sam Darnold last year in Minnesota. It's all about situation, I think, plays a big role into that. And Mac Jones looked great in this one. Very efficient, took care of the ball, no interceptions. Obviously utilized McCaffrey, that play action game, just finding his tight ends for touchdowns. And I picked the 49ers in this one. It was kind of a 50-50 game just with all the injuries. Brock Purdy obviously not playing. And then George Kittle. But great teams, find a way to win. And it wasn't pretty in New Orleans. Spencer Rattler, shout out to him. they also played great, made this, one a nail biter at the end. Guys like Rashid Shaheed, they got playmakers, Kamara that can run the ball. But overall, the 49ers, are just the better coach team, a little bit more talented, definitely probably a lot more talented, even with the injuries, which is why they're able to hang on and, get that 2-0 start that people were optimistic about, the easy schedule, get some wins early, even with the injuries, and they were able to finish the job. So shout out to 49ers. Very proud of my 1 o'clock slate where I only got one game wrong, and that was very impressive for the 49ers, to be able to win with all the injuries and resilience, like in years past that they haven't been able to. Next up, surprisingly, game of the week so far. Giants at Cowboys. Obviously, these two teams, a lot of popularity, get hyped up. The games always end up kind of being a stinker, one team dominating, which pretty much been the Cowboys lately. But this game was amazing. It started off, I picked the Cowboys obviously at home. The way they looked against Philly, I had optimism, but the Giants came out. That defense set the tone, getting to Dak early, trying to stuff up the run game. And then Russell Wilson, Malik Neighbors, that deep ball was working for the Giants all day. Wan'Dale Robinson hit a couple deep shots. And this game was just ended up turning into a great back and forth. Dallas's offense, woke up in that second half. Dak to CD. Late in the game, Dak to Pickens. Javonte Williams in that run game started to get going. And then for the Giants, they were with less than a minute left, I believe with like 20 seconds left. Russell Wilson hits Malik Neighbors for the 37-34 lead. We think it's over. That Brandon Aubrey, this is why special teams is so important. And Brandon Aubrey hits like a 60-plus yarder. Just money. Could have been good from like 75. And he's been one of the best kickers, might be the best kicker if he, continues like this in NFL history. Because man, he is amazing. He's a weapon. Has like 90% accuracy from 50 plus. It's pretty much unheard of. And he gets the job done. We head to overtime, and then unfortunately, the defense is actually kind of start to clamp down a little. A couple punts back and forth, and then Russell Wilson tries to hit Malik Neighbors deep, just kind of an errant throw. Donovan Wilson picks off kind of like an arm punt, but then Dak in that offense finally gets moving. Dak utilizes his legs for the first down, and then what's like a 45-yarder, pretty much a chip shot from Brandon Aubrey. You can hit that with his eyes closed. Allow the Cowboys to win this one. But obviously, for the Giants, a lot of great optimism for the offense. Russell Wilson, 400-plus yards. Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson, just getting a bunch of different guys involved. Was definitely great. They did a much better job keeping him protected, giving him time to throw that deep ball. And then for the Cowboys, obviously the positive is Brian Schottenheimer and this offense will be elite. Javonte Williams, once again, looks revived. Miles Sanders got into the end zone. And then obviously CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens look like great weapons. Obviously still have Jake Ferguson. So Dak Prescott in this team will, this offense will be elite, but obviously that defense, is definitely missing Micah Parsons and Jerome Bland's out. So how can they survive, without one of their better corners? It'll be interesting. But, for the Cowboys, you'll just take the dub. Great offensive win. And I feel like we always get a couple of these games a year for the Cowboys where it's just amazing shootouts. Just happen to be against the Giants. And for the Giants, they did incorporate Jackson Dart into some plays, which are interesting. But they're more so just like QB read options, which aren't really always, it kind of became a little bit predictable once they did like the third, fourth time. So, they're trying to get him involved, but the way Russell Wilson played, obviously, you got to keep him on the bench and just, try and continue. Hopefully this defense can figure it out in the secondary because like we talked about, they do have an elite front seven just with all the different guys like Burns, Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, Abdul Carter. But that secondary definitely left a lot to be desired. But with that being said, still a great game. And if you're a Giants or Cowboys fan, you probably enjoyed that because, especially for the Giants, you haven't seen offense like that since the Eli Manning days because that's a lot of fun. And then the last 1 o'clock game that was Lions Bears, probably, the worst game or either that or Browns Ravens. It looked like it could have been exciting early. Caleb Williams and Roma Dunze looked good in the first half. The Lions, though, they got back to their ways and they heard the noise after that Green Bay game. They made a statement in this one. Jared Goff, 5 touchdown passes. Jamison Williams streaking wide open. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 100-plus yards, a couple of scores. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, both had rushing touchdowns. They set the tone. They bullied the Bears in this one. Isaac Tussle making another great catch at the half, which arguably the Bears did get screwed when it was still only 21-14. And the referee called it that he got out of bounds even though he was in, and maybe that was it, but still it's only a 2 touchdown game. There's still 30 minutes left of football to be played and you're only down 2 touchdowns. They just came out flat. Caleb Williams trying to make some plays and then obviously got picked on like a second and like 20 scramble. Kirby Joseph, I believe, had the INT, and they were trolling Ben Johnson, they doing like that celebration of the fake trip play they ran against the Bears a year ago. So, Dan Campbell and company do get revenge on it. Their former OC in this offense once again looked electric. And the Lions are just too good not to. I think they just ran into a juggernaut on the Packers home opener, week one, Micah Parsons debut, and it was just kind of set up, but they definitely looked way better this week. The offensive line kept Jared Goff much more protected, and he still has two stud left tackles, and obviously, or two tackles, and obviously one of the best in Penei Sewell. They were due for a bounce back, and they got it. They ran the ball, passed the ball, looked like the Lions of last year, dropping another 50 burger. So overall for the Lions, you still have elite weapons. This team is going to be very good. And that defense, with Brian Branch flying over, making plays, Kirby Joseph, and Amik Robertson, and Terrion Arnold. They got some really good corners that hopefully just continue to develop. So overall, for the Bears, just disappointing because a lot of Bears fans are like, when will this pain end? New DC, new head coach, new improved offensive line, same results. Just horrible defeats, and for the Bears now 0-2, and then 0-2 in the division, which makes it even worse. So, can they climb out of this hole? I don't know. I'm curious to see what they look like next week, because overall, I did pick the Lions to bounce back, but just disappointing game. Broncos Colts. Wow. I picked Denver, and shout out Daniel Jones. He keeps proving me wrong. But the story of this game was obviously Jonathan Taylor, both in the rushing and receiving game, was kind of doing whatever he wanted. I think was trying to get revenge last year where he thought he scored and just kind of tossed the ball back, celebrated a little bit too early, and that really changed the game. And the Broncos end up kind of running away with that game last year. He made sure to not let his team down this time. He kind of put the team on his back. But so did, Daniel Jones did a great job utilizing the play action, finding guys like Alec Pierce, Tyler Warren, Michael Pittman. They're making plays, and they were going after, Daniel Jones wasn't scared to throw it at Surtain, whoever was covering, Pittman, Pierce. They were going after this number one defense last year, and they made the Broncos look silly. Once again, I don't think the Colts punted. The Broncos did get a couple stops on fourth down. Bo Nix, did look a lot better, but he made not awful, it was just unlucky tip. Had a red zone pick, and then obviously Broncos will miss like a 45-yarder. The Colts moved the ball, had some questionable play calling at the end, made it a 60-yarder, which was short, but then obviously running into the center gives them like a 45-yarder, which the Colts kicker does hit. So the Colts walk this off. Overall, a great game. The offenses showed out. Bo Nix definitely had a way better game than last week, but Daniel Jones and that offense continued their success. And arguably a more impressive win just against the opponent. So Daniel Jones, I think, has proven a lot of the haters wrong. And I'm actually excited for him because, I think it's all about situation. Like I talked about Shane Steichen, a great offensive mind. You give him elite running back Taylor, elite weapons in Tyler Warren, guys like Josh Downs, Pierce, Pittman that are just really good wide receivers that can make plays, and a solid offensive line. He looks like a MVP candidate so far through 2 weeks. So I'm happy to see it. A great game for the Colts. Be able to make a statement against a playoff team last year and the number one defense. And the way it looked week one was going to be the number one defense, and still very well could be. But once again, no punts, very impressive. Daniel Jones showed out. Next game up, the Cardinals versus the Panthers. The good thing for me is the Cardinals won their 2-0, my NFC West winner. But it has not been impressive, to say the least. The Saints last week, they won like 20-13, just kind of a whatever game. Murray was efficient, but they didn't really get a lot going. This week, they go up like 27-3, and I'm like, okay, like the Cardinals look like they're bouncing back, and then it was a Kyler Murray pick that kind of got things going. Bryce Young looked completely different. I believe it was like 19 straight unanswered points. Bryce Young started to dice up the Panthers, 3 touchdown passes, over 300 yards. Was passing the ball a lot. Obviously, you don't want to pass the ball 55 times, but that's what happens when you get down a lot. But, for the Panthers, Ted McMillan had 100 plus, or 100 yards exactly. I was just a week late on that prediction where he'd have 100 plus yards. And then for Arizona, the run game is the big thing. They could really not get it going again. James Conner, just 3 yards a carry. Kyler Murray using his legs. But, overall, just an okay game. Kyler Murray played okay. I thought I think he was efficient up until that last or that interception that kind of got things spiraling. And then the Panthers recovered the onside kick, a chance to win. Finally, the Cardinals defense was able to clamp down, get after Bryce Young, force a fumble, and just run the clock out. But, still not the best showing, but, you take care of business at home, 2-0. That's all I care about. Let's see how they look next week. Then the Super Bowl rematch, highly anticipated, Eagles Chiefs. And, this wasn't pretty. Philly, Jalen Hurts, I think, had just 100 yards passing. They were really just running the ball. Saquon, and even Saquon, besides that, big rushing touchdown he had that was like 20 yards. Nothing came easy for either offense. Late in the game, Mahomes, found Thornton for a big touchdown to cut the lead. But I think what lost the Chiefs this game was they were driving. Kelsey catches it, kind of drops it, and it goes right to the Eagles DB, and they return it, and I believe that leads to the Eagles touchdown to give them the lead 20-10. So I think that was the story of why the Chiefs lost. But it was a great defensive game for both teams. The Chiefs definitely let nothing easy happen compared to the Super Bowl, but this Chiefs offense, just lacks playmakers, and the Eagles defense, for the most part, contained the passing attack. Mahomes used his legs as much as he could. And was once again the Chiefs' leading rusher, which is not a good thing for Chiefs fans because Mahomes is just kind of doing everything for this team. And even on that first touchdown drive to give the Chiefs a 10-7 lead, it's just him running around for his life and just making plays because he's Patrick Mahomes. So overall, the Chiefs 0-2 start. Eagles get a gritty win on the road. For the Eagles, you'll take it. It hasn't been pretty the first weeks, but it doesn't need to be. They're just against a feisty Dallas team in Kansas City at home. It's not going to look pretty, but this Eagles defense is elite. This offense, I think, obviously still elite with Saquon, this offensive line. And I think they'll just start getting the passing game going, hopefully for fancy purposes because I have Devontae Smith, but A.J. Brown, Dallas Garrett, this team will start to ramp it up more. And, when they face, inferior opponents. But shout out the Eagles, nothing easy in Arrowhead. And for Kansas City, just a lot of question marks, Rashid Rice needs to come back. Xavier Worthy, when will he back? Travis Kelce can't, have a drop like that. So it'll be interesting to see. But the Eagles, showed why they're Super Bowl champs, why they're one of the most resilient teams in this league, and they just find ways to win, which is what makes elite teams in this league and why the Eagles are still the best team in the NFL. And then the Sunday night game, my Vikings, boy, what a stinker. The Falcons, shout out Bijan, man. Top 3 running back right now, just so elusive. The breaks he make, and then Tyler Argiel is a great compliment to him, just a power back. McCarthy did not look good at all. No fourth quarter magic in this one. Threw a couple picks, had a fumble. Just a rough game for the offensive line as a whole. We need Darisaw back. We need Addison back. Only one more game until he's back from his 3-game suspension. But, overall, the Falcons defense play amazing, and they invested in getting pressure, and that's why they drafted guys like James Pierce, and he had I believe a couple sacks, and signed Leonard Floyd, an 8+ sack guy a year. They were just making plays. I believe had like 6-7 sacks on the night, just really rattling JJ McCarthy, obviously a strip sack, and then Billy Bowman Jr. Getting an interception, breaking up some plays, and then Watts getting that pick at the end to seal it. Overall for the Falcons, just a complete team effort, great running game, and then great defense, and that offensive line held up for the most part. The Vikings did break through a couple times, but just a dominant win on Sunday Night Football to really show they improved in the trenches, and they're going to be a run-first team, use Michael Penix in the play action. Michael Penix played turnover-free football. Overall, just a great W from the Falcons, and for the Vikings, you got to be patient. It's only J.J. McCarthy's second start, but they got to use Jordan Mason, that run game, more, and they got to get Darisaw and Addison back because despite having Jefferson, Thielen, Hawkinson, it's not looking great right now. McCarthy, looks very jittery back there. You got to give it time, at least the full year, to ride it out to see what he looks like. But 7 out of the 8 quarters have not been good. They did have that magical fourth quarter to win week 1. No magic, obviously, in this one, putting up 6 points, no touchdowns. Just kind of a dud. Kevin O'Connell, not the best play calling, in my opinion. In that 4th and 1 with like 9 minutes left, you're down 9. The Falcons are just going to run the ball and run it efficiently. I would have loved to see them, just go for it. You got to be aggressive in these games. That Dan Campbell Lions approach, I love that. And he punted, and that's kind of, you knew when the game was over. Falcons ran 6 minutes, got that touchdown. Vikings actually let him score. So it was like, why even punt in the first place? But it is what it is. Falcons, we're the better team in this one. And JJ McCarthy, I'm really, intrigued to see how this offense looks at home, no primetime game against Cincinnati, and how the defense looks, not facing Joe Burrow. Can they, win that one against still, though, a 2-0 Bengals team? It'll be very, exciting to see. But overall, kudos to the Falcons. Bijan, Tyler Algier, that's an elite running back duo, one of the best in the league. That offensive line was moving, and Michael Penix played efficient football. Just find guys like Kyle Pitts. Drake London had a couple catches, obviously had that fumble, but, he'll never really do that. And, just found a way to make this game efficient football, and that's where Raheem Morris wants to play, and that's what the Falcons got. So they improved to 1-1 with a dominant State Road win. And then, like I said, we have 2 games tonight, Buccaneers-Falcons, where I have the Buccaneers winning. Like I said, the matchup's going to be Baker Mayfield and that high-flying passing attack, Emeka Buka, a couple ties last week, facing Will Anderson, this elite Texans defense, and then how does CJ Stroud in this offense look against Tampa Bay and Todd Bowles defense? A lot of interesting matchups. But, just with how bad Houston's offensive line is, they got to prove it to me. But I'll just take Tampa. I trust their offense more. And then Chargers versus Raiders, a great AFC West matchup. Gianti, Gino, Jacoby, Brock Bowers, this high-flying Raiders offense versus an elite Chargers defense from last year, number 1 in points. And then Justin Herbert, Quinn Johnson, Keenan Allen looking to build off their Brazil win, Amari Hampton to get involved more, these rookie running backs. So it'll be exciting to see. I also took the Chargers in this one, but 2 great Monday games for our double slate. But let me get, as always, make sure to, like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. We're going to be here covering all NFL season, these games, and recap these games tomorrow. But let me know in the comments, what was, your biggest week 2 takeaway, surprise, disappointment? Did your favorite team win? What were your picks? How'd you do? I believe I got 3 picks wrong so far, with that being Steelers, Seahawks, Falcons, Vikings, and Broncos, Colts. But with that being said, as always, if you like sports content or mainly NFL content, make sure to like and subscribe, because like I said, we're going to be here 365 days, covering every game, every, important news break. So if you like that, make sure to turn on your notifications. But as always, thank you for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Peace.